right, welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman, talking more Rutgers football, now just 2 weeks away from the season opening kickoff at SHI Stadium, Rutgers versus Howard. Things are really ramping up here. Week 3 of training camp, getting towards the second scrimmage, which will take place on Saturday. Greg Schiano will meet with the media after that. Obviously, not a lot of news coming out of camp, as to be expected when Greg Schiano is your head coach. And obviously, strategically, makes a lot of sense. But for fans, there's not a lot to chew on right now. But I've had plenty of content here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I had Jake Butt on from BTN, who is really high on Rutgers this season previously, a few days ago. And then I also had Larry Crane of Night Watch on Wednesday's episode. We did a real deep dive in terms of things we think will happen, could happen, and won't happen for Rutgers football in 2024. Today's episode, I wanted to touch on a graphic that came out on Twitter yesterday, X, KFord Ratings. It's a really good account. They do rankings and some analytical work for college football, and they did a projected list of one-score games for every college football team, FBS, for the 2024 season. Colorado was the only team to be projected to be in 10 one-score games, but Rutgers was in 9, which was just a handful of teams. They were the only Big Ten team included. There was USC and Nebraska are listed at 8. You have Maryland, I believe, at 7. But other than that, no one is really close to that number of 9. And I think it just speaks to what we've been talking about all offseason, is that while the schedule is easy, it's within the context of what it used to be. It's not an easy schedule. You don't have an easy schedule in the Big Ten. It doesn't exist. And there's a lot of 50-50 toss-up games. And the 9 projected one-score games just speaks to that, in the sense of they really could go either way. And the dream of 10 or more wins, it's alive. It should be. But I think it's also important to know that there is a flip side to that coin. And obviously, health is so focused on that. Cali Manis, not only does he have to develop, he has to stay healthy. And that speaks to the offense as a whole, your playmakers, everyone meshing together. I think that's an interesting part of this. And I think it speaks to the schedule. With Greg Schiano doing something very smart in terms of, this is the first time, I think maybe only the second season since he's been back, they haven't played an FBS non-conference game to start the season. Obviously, the Big Ten controlled last year, but they also opened at BC. They played Syracuse early on. Maybe that wasn't an opener. But my point remains is that Howard and Akron in the MAC, not an easy game, but at the same time, a very winnable game. They're on paper, their second most likely win on paper. And starting off the season with those 2 games, and then that bye, which is a really good time, I think. At first I didn't, but now with the way the schedule plays out, going to Virginia Tech the following week, short rest against Washington, then you're at Nebraska, and then you host Wisconsin. It really does give you an extra window. It's obviously not training camp, but it gives you an extra week of development time. You hopefully get a lot of younger players playing in those first 2 games. And then you have a whole extra week to kind of reset and add more development into what they're doing. And I think as a whole, going back to health, then you're going to give guys another opportunity to, someone like Tyreen Powell, we talked about with Larry, in terms of, does it really make sense to even put him out there before Virginia Tech? He's still recovering from the Achilles. Schiano said he's going to be ready at the start of the season, but we'll see what they do with Tyreen Powell. But it would not be surprising at all to see him make his debut against Virginia Tech. I think that would be a positive, but at the same time, you don't want to rush him back. But my point is, with that extra bye week, any players that are going through things now or early on in those first 2 weeks, you have that extra week of recovery time before things really ramp up from a physicality standpoint, from a opponent size standpoint. So I think it's all really positive, but it just goes back to the fact that 9 projected one-score games. Obviously, Akron and Howard are not included in that. I'm going to guess that USC is that third game that's not included, a road game on short rest. It's possible if half glass full, maybe they're not projecting UCLA at home, homecoming for Rutgers as a one-score game. That's possible too. So everything else is so on that fine line of it's going to come down to execution. And going back to the offense in terms of, the really, as veteran as a team as this is, you have a brand new quarterback in terms of meshing into the program, not obviously a Big Ten veteran, which is a big positive here. And then you have Demir Miller, who everyone's banking on to be the top playmaker and has certainly the talent to do so. But he is making that jump from FCS. And those first 2 games are critical for him to really establish a flow and a rhythm with Calic Manis, get his feet wet, and get ready for when things really ramp up in those 10 Big Ten and obviously Virginia Tech, 10 FBS opponents in a row. And then, of course, Nassim Brantley also making the leap from FCS. Obviously, he's been practicing with the program for a long time. And then you have Ian Strong, we hope, makes that step. You have Dremel back, and then you have some younger guys. So that receiving core, it's going to take time to mesh. And I really think the schedule is conducive to doing that. And then when the lights come on, by the way, Virginia Tech designating the Rutgers game as a, they didn't call it a whiteout. They called it a white effect. A little weird. Essentially, it's a whiteout game. Everyone wears white. I talked to someone I know, a big Virginia Tech fan, and the last 2 white effect games they've had have been night games. They don't know if it's a night game yet. It's going to come down to TV. This game could be on ESPN on a Saturday night. I mean, that'd be prime time. That would be a big deal. Worst case, I think it's probably going to be a 3:30, 4 o'clock game. So at any rate, Blacksburg is always a tough place to play. Now they're doing their whiteout. So I just think that Brent Pry, I think Virginia Tech has had Rutgers circled on their schedule for a long time. And I think this just kind of flags that even more with the fact that they designated it a whiteout game. And if it's a night game, that's, it's going to be such an amazing atmosphere. And everything is on the table for Rutgers in that game and for Virginia Tech. I mean, both are trendy sleeper picks. But I think that first month, training camp's going to break next week. Then you have the week before Howard, right? And they open on that Thursday. So you have you have like 10 days until you play Akron. And then you have 14 days till you play Virginia Tech. So there really is, even though training camp is ending, there is a lot of ramp up time for Rutgers. And I think with this group, again, as veteran as they are, you're giving veterans time to work their way back. Some are, the veterans that have had injuries. I mean, Shiana mentioned Teray. He's already back practicing, which is a good sign, of course. But anyone that's kind of dealing with anything, it's going to give them an opportunity to get some rest and heal before things really ramp up. And going back to the one-score projections, identity is so important. Jake Butt talked about how Rutgers knows their identity. They don't have nearly as many questions as so many other teams in the Big Ten. And when it comes down to close games, Rutgers knows what they can rely on, and they know what they do well. And I think we all hope that with Monungai back, with Brown hopefully healthy, with Calic Manis hopefully more accurate, with the offensive line stable, with a more dynamic receiving core, the offense can take it to another level. Now, what that level is going to be remains to be seen. But I think for crunch time, down the stretch, I think it bodes well there in close games, because I think they, as much as they are going to rely on Monungai to basically drive the will out of their opponents by his just back-breaking runs down the stretch of games, I think the other key thing that we haven't really talked about is, will Rutgers have the ability to come back in games? So long, so many years, because of quarterback play, they haven't been able to come back. they fall down double digits, I mean, more times than not, they really haven't made it close. And in this regard, they obviously had the Michigan State comeback last year, but it was also special teams, bread and butter, started it, and Monungai just took over from there. But in terms of throughout the season, their ability to come back with Calic Manis, with this offense, that's going to be critical to winning these one-score games, because you're not going to jump out in front of every game. You're just not going to do that, especially in games that are pretty close on paper. So I think that is a huge aspect of all of this. Is not just about, I don't think, I said with Larry, I still think they're going to be 65% run, over 60%. But I think in what they do with the pass game, I think, in different down situations, I think they're going to be willing to take some more chances. I think in the red zone, you might see them be able to do some different things with playmakers they now have in the pass game. But at the same time, I think the spread is still going to be, listen, Chiano still wants to ground and pound and control the clock and win with the run game and defense and special teams. They're not going to be lighting it up through the air, but they are going to be more versatile in what they can do when they do throw the ball. That being said, being a little bit more unpredictable down the stretch of games is going to help. But at the same time, when they do fall behind, I think Rutgers is going to be able to be more effective in staying in games. And I think that morale-wise for the defense, you don't have, I think for so many years, the defense thought they had to be perfect, and you started to see when they would get wore down in games and in the season, it was impossible, right? Because, and in reality, they kind of did have to be perfect with the way the offenses were for so long. And I think that is a benefit of potential growth with this offense, is that it's going to boost the morale of the defense. It's going to keep them fresher. It's going to keep more pep in their step. Not only is it going to keep them off the field more, and hopefully avoid these repetitious 3 and outs that just are defensive killers down the stretch of games. But at the same time, I think it gives hope. They're going to believe as a team that even if they fall behind, even if they make mistakes early, they can come back. And I know they'll say they always did and it's chopped the moment and all that. But when you have an offense that you have faith in and that there's guys that can make plays, not just Monungai, I think it's going to go a long way towards the confidence of this team and their ability to win these one-score games. Now, in a perfect world, they won't have as many one-score games. They'll be beating teams by 2 scores. How we saw them beat Virginia Tech last year, how we saw them beat Indiana, how we saw them just destroy the will of teams down the stretch. But at the end of the day, going into the season, as I've talked about at length, probably tired of hearing about it, there are a lot of close games on the schedule, and Rutgers, their ability to execute down the stretch is going to be the difference. It's not going to be a preparation thing. It's not going to be an experience thing. It's going to be this team coming together and building on the identity that already exists. And that's really with the offense. And then the defense, your veterans stepping up, building depth throughout the season. But there is that November, I talked about yesterday with Larry. They have a chance to run the table in November. They really do. Not going to be easy at all. Those are 4 teams that it's going to be a battle. And again, fortuitous bye the week before that November stretch. So there's everyone, all Rutgers fans know that there's a lot of opportunity here. And that's what's so exciting. Rutgers has to take advantage of that opportunity. And I think the way that the more I'm looking at this in terms of the close projected games and the way the schedule starts, even though as fans, Howard, Akron, it's not the most exciting opponents. I think for the structure of the season, for the development of this team, for the health of this team, I think it's a very positive thing in how this whole thing is starting, because you essentially, the first month of the season, you have a lot of development time still. You have a lot of room for players to get healthy. And I think it just is going to set up that 4-week stretch, which really is going to help define your ceiling in terms of that 4-game stretch at Virginia Tech, Washington, at Nebraska, back home with Wisconsin. Talked about a 2-2 split. I don't think you can complain with that. You don't have to be happy with the 2-2 split, but with those programs where Rutgers has been, not even beating three of them ever before, two tough road environments, 2-2, you're on schedule. Anything worse, your ceiling goes down. Anything more, your ceiling goes up. And maybe that playoff dream, maybe that double-digit win dream, it wouldn't be it would be very much alive. But a 2-2 stretch, and then let's just say that UCLA game, right? Rutgers will be favored in that game, no doubt there. Then you go to USC, worst case 5-2, with a lot on the table, pretty much other than a college football playoff berth. But I guess if you win that game and then run November, you're 10-2 with some marquee wins. USC is ranked right now in the preseason poll. Who knows? But this is a long-winded way of saying Rutgers projected to be in 9 one-score games in 2024. Veteran team, some meshing that needs to occur on offense, but plenty of reasons for hope. A fortuitous start to the season, I think, with how the schedule unfolds in terms of having practice time, repetition, time for guys to get healthy, all before the schedule really ramps up. So a lot of positives there. I've gone back and forth. You get nervous at times in the preseason. You get optimistic at times. I'll have plenty more preview coverage. I have a couple big episodes with David Anderson coming out next week as part of the preview. I have some more guests planned as well. And we'll keep the coverage coming here for Rutgers football. Have some basketball stuff coming as well. Women's soccer kicks off their season tonight, Thursday, 2024 school year. Athletic season for Rutgers begins tonight. Rutgers at NJIT. I'll be covering all the Olympic sports as well with tidbits throughout the episodes throughout the year, as always. But my last point, I made a joke on Twitter when I put out the Snyder tweet about the 9 one-score projected games, is that this season is going to be sponsored by your favorite antacid, whether it's Maalox, whether it's Tums, whatever your coping mechanism is going to be, it's going to be a roller coaster. And it's going to be fun, and it's going to be crazy. So get ready for it. Enjoy the end of summer. Keep prepping for the season, along with Side Me, here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast. And a wild journey is ahead. As the computer says, a lot of close games. We'll see. I'm sure people are simulating it on the college football game, EA Sports. So if you do, send me a note. Let me know if you've played out the 24 season, how that played out for you. We'll have plenty more here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast coming up. And thanks so much for listening once again.